Support for Consider This is provided by the University of Nebraska at Omaha College of Communication, Fine Arts, and Media.
From the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, life after the flooding. Here to talk more about it are UNMC's Ellen Dyson, a community outreach specialist with the Agricultural Safety and Health Center in the College of Public Health, and Jessica Seaman, a research coordinator in the Division of Geriatric Medicine. Jessica is here today to talk about her journey through the flooding. Thank you both so much for being here and welcome.
Thank you for having us.
You bet, you bet. Ellen, I want to go back a few weeks to when this all began. Set the stage for us.
Well, anyone in the region will remember that a few weeks ago we were hearing about a bomb cyclone, something many of us had never heard about, kind of a low pressure system. And we were watching our friends to the west, right? We were watching Colorado, we were watching maybe the Dakotas, thinking that this was really going to affect them. And it did, but we didn't have any idea what was going to come of that. And what resulted on our end to the east was heavy rains. And when heavy rains fall on snow-packed, frozen ground, we know, I heard it compared to rain falling on tile, right? It hits the tile and it just runs. Nothing's soaking in. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of the first part of the problem. The fact that also we had a warm-up come. And so up north we had some of our big ice pack that was melted and turned loose. So on top of extraordinary amounts of rain from this event, the ice flows and the ice packs that were melted coming down and entering our waterways. And some of us had, if we were alerted, it was not, some people just did not have a lot of time because this amount of water came down quickly. And it entered the Missouri, our Platte, mm-hmm. and some of our other tributaries. And we know that the Spencer Dam, once that was breached, I think we were alerted that this was going to hit our region.
What areas then across the state, Ellen, would you say were hardest hit?
Well, what we've seen is that the regions that are shown here, we're on eastern side of Nebraska, obviously on that, around Omaha, we had the Missouri River that was impacted coming down the Elkhorn, and of course, as Jessica will discuss, the Platte River came out of its banks as well. And you see this visual showing off at Air Force Base, and they actually had issues with entering and exiting the base because of this flooding and evacuations.
Wow. And from there, so tough to see what really happened down on the ground. Lots and lots of loss. Ellen, talk to us about the losses in all of this.
Absolutely. And the most tragic, of course, was the human loss. Mm-hmm. Hard to talk about, hard to fathom. But we know that there was human loss, and beyond that, the livestock loss. And we've talked to many farmers who lost great numbers of livestock. And I think people, if you farm, you understand this, and maybe if you have pets, you can understand this. Mm-hmm. But this livestock are very, very important to these farmers. They will put the safety of their livestock above the safety of themselves. And we saw that in many cases, people who wouldn't leave their farms because they knew if they did, their livestock would perish.
Jessica, you were one of those impacted, maybe not as directly as some, but you were part of a community that was hit pretty hard. Let's talk about first, where are you from? We're going to put up a map so our viewers can kind of understand where you're from.
Sure. I live down at Chris Lake, which is part of the Hanson-Chris Betty Lake community, down in South Sarpy, near the Platte River. And so it's, you know, right kind of near the Platte River, but no one ever expected it was going to hit us until it happened.
Wow. And talk about all of this from your perspective. What happened in your own life?
Sure. So it all kind of started back on March 15th on a Friday. I went to work and I kind of noticed that the roadways were kind of starting to fill with water, so alerted my family and things. And we had heard things up north the last few days, but never thought it was going to be our neighborhood. I got a call about 11 o'clock when I was at work, and it was just saying, hey, some of the neighbors are evacuating, and that's when it really hit home. So I went home and seen people evacuating, and people on my street were kind of like, oh, you guys are kind of going too far. It's not going to happen here. Don't worry. Come on over to our house. And then around 4 o'clock that day, the sheriff shut off the power to everyone. So that really forced a lot of people out, which I think was probably a good thing that people got out when they did, because as Ellen said, the loss of life could be even more tragic if they hadn't got out. And so we all left Friday night. Some of us came back on Saturday, and the water had already started coming up, sandbagging, and put your shovel down and the water was already taking your shovel. And so we were let back in about a week after the flood. And so that time during that was really hard for people to know what was going on and wondering, is their house still there, is it not?
Well, listening to your story, I can't even imagine backing up to have somebody, you know it's bad when somebody comes to you and says, you've got to leave. Mm-hmm. I mean, what is going through your mind at that point?
I don't think any of us could fathom that it was going to happen. I think everyone, when they left, they took, you know, a few pairs of clothes. There were some that, you know, took more, but a lot of people took an overnight bag and took some things and thought they would be back in a couple of days. And that's just, unfortunately, what didn't happen. A lot of people have lost everything, everything in their homes, all their photos, all their everything that they've collected throughout their life. And so it's really hard for people to come back and try to salvage what they can.
Ellen, Jessica said something there, that's when it really hit home. And I think for viewers across the state right now, it did hit home at different times and in different ways for people. I think for those unaffected, it was watching the news. It was seeing the aerial photos and looking at that and thinking, oh my gosh, this really is as big of a deal as people are saying. We want to look at some video here now. State leaders, of course, stepping in and analyzing, assessing what had happened. And as we look at this video, just kind of walk us through that a little bit.
Well, what we, and a lot of this, like you said, was only reports from, you know, our news. I actually had a son who flew over this, being evacuated from Fremont, and he had taken some of these images and sent me an image of a farm, much like this, that was stranded. There is no way in or out of that farm. And what we know is that people tried to stay as long as they could. Mm-hmm. That people stayed, and Jessica said, you don't want to believe that it's going to be as bad as people are predicting. And so we had reports of farmers that refused to leave, and you know, having had livestock, I can understand their
mm-hmm.
you know, reluctance to leave a living animal and have to abandon it because of this tragedy.
Well, then you hear, right, that the waters are receding, and there are many people, of course, rightly so, breathing a sigh of relief. Okay, the waters are pulling back, but then that exposes a whole different challenge for people. So, Jessica, you go back into the community. I mean, what are you expecting, and what was the reality of the situation, right?
Yeah, you see people in their raw emotions. You see people the way that they've never seen them before. I mean, just sheer sadness, shock. They didn't know what to expect when they came back, to see everything kind of in disarray. I mean, there was people that things floated out of their houses and they don't know where their things are. For people that are trying to salvage their things, it's now a process of, can they save their home? Can it be fixed, or is it going to be a tear down? Are they going to come back to the community? So there's a lot of work that has to be done, and there's many hazards now, as Ellen will talk about, when we go back in and try to see what can be saved and pick some of the pieces up.
As with so much else, in terms of dramatic changes in our lives, so much of it is mental, and you've got to be in the right frame of mind mentally before you're going to be able to succeed in getting some of the things that you're going to talk about accomplished. So Jessica, my question being, you go back and you're probably feeling relieved we didn't get it nearly like some of the other people did. I would imagine you've become kind of a source of hope for some of the people in your community. How has it changed you?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's brought us together. It's brought us, you know, we have one common goal, which is to repair our neighborhood and try to get it back to a place that people can live. And so it's one step at a time. We support each other with what's going on at the time. So it might be going and grabbing supplies. It might be, you know, tearing down drywall. Whatever people need is kind of what our community has rallied around and helped each other out. So one step at a time.
Yeah, amen to that. And Ellen, I know you are focusing on farm and ranch families, right? That's your area.
Well, that's our expertise, but we've expanded in the last few weeks.
But why is that? So how did you get involved in that area? Maybe that's what I should start with.
Well, our center is part of the College of Public Health, and we are funded as, we're funded every 5 years as an agricultural safety and health center. This center involves research, outreach, prevention, and we do a lot of education. And this is around keeping farmers, ranchers, anyone that works in agriculture safe and healthy, because people don't realize that those occupations have the highest fatality rates of almost any occupation. And so we are funded to change that curve and get these farmers and ranchers, you know, with some, whether it means re-engineering what they're using to make it safer, or maybe changing some practices and traditions. But we've been working in that now at the center for about 9 years, almost 9 years. And but when this issue came up, we were very well equipped because we understand how farmers work and what the dangers they have just without water. And you add the water, and then we can use some of the same tools that we understand about working on the farm for recovery. So we were very fortunate to have a lot of tools at our disposal and a lot of information that we could share almost immediately.
I was going to say, as this is coming down the pike, you're thinking, okay, here are our concerns, knowing the situation, and we want to put those concerns up for our viewers. And Ellen, if you would walk us through those, this is what you're thinking as the Jessicas of the world in her community are.
That's right. And I'd like to point out that Jessica is a public health leader. She called on us to come into her community and teach and educate people about some of these concerns. So I want to reach out to Jessica, or say a big thank you to Jessica for doing that.
Thank you.
So we know that and here is the differentiation. You know, we know that there's a lot of chemicals on farms, but think about the chemicals in your garage. Think about the chemicals that were in the garages of the people in Jessica's neighborhood. Those are now in our water. Right? They're in the water that these people are going to be trying to recover from. And that may be oil, it may be gas, it may be pesticides. We also have a lot of hidden hazards. Think about the things that may have come into that waterway. It may have been propane tanks. It may have been campers. I saw one of the pontoon boats flipped over in the Platte River when I was driving to North Platte. And so there's lots of hazards. There may be chasms that were cut out by that powerful water that you're not going to see. And if you step down in there, it's going to be a hazard. And that we have lots of slip, trips, and falls, and we always worried about cuts with any kind of flooding, right? Because we have broken glass and we have other things that are going to be sharp. So if you have something that you're reaching down to grab, we want to make sure that people are equipped with the right gloves to do that. And then we know that everything should be de-energized. Jessica is very fortunate. She said that she got to have her power back at her home. But there are a lot of homes and a lot of farms that have absolutely no electricity. And when that electricity comes back on, we don't want it to be turned on until it's been checked out. But when it does come back on, there's still lots of concerns about energizing. We have displaced wildlife. We have a farmer up north who walked into his barn after a few days when he could finally get in, and there was a raccoon staring him in the face because it had not been able to escape the water and was stuck up on his bench. So we know that there's going to be lots of wildlife that's been displaced, and that may be snakes and rodents and things. So people do need to be aware when they open up something that hasn't been open for a while to give these animals a space to get out and move on with their lives. And I cannot stress enough the concern we have with well water. Many of the wells, and are you on well water as well?
Yes, we are.
So many of the wells the well heads were contaminated, which means the water got down in the well. There has been some free well testing. I would really urge people to go out, find some of that testing, and do not drink their water or even wash their hands in water until they have that tested. And then communicable diseases. We know that there were animals and fecal matter in this water, and so we know we want to avoid any contact with that in our mouths. And then tetanus is always a concern with flooding, and anyone that has not had their tetanus shot in the last 10 years, then we want to make sure that they do get that shot. And mold, unfortunately, we did reach 70 degrees. Mold blooms at 70 degrees. Yesterday was a day for mold bloom, so now we have another concern, a big concern, and we want to make sure people understand how dangerous the mold is. And then probably, if we talk about the biggest concern of all, it's the anxiety and the fatigue of people that are just exhausted by this disaster. And there are some great resources out there that can help folks with that.
So broad strokes then, when we talk about recovery and cleanup. So start there.
Well, what we want people to do is to remember that everything they touch is a hazard right now. If you're involved in recovery, if you're reaching down to pick up a cabinet out of that mud and sand, we want you to have something on to protect your hands. And something like these neoprene gloves would be a great choice, because these would be something that people can put on and be assured not only they're not cut resistant, or they're cut resistant. They are not. You could possibly cut yourself if it was sharp enough. But what it's going to do is it's going to keep that contamination off of your hands. And then we think about this from head to toe protection.
Okay.
Right? So let's start with the eyes. A lot of that water, we just told you, there's a lot of things in there you do not want in your eyes, and our eyes are an excellent source to our bloodstream. People don't think about that. So investing in either a pair of goggles like this that have a nice vent in them, something like that would be great to have as you're cleaning up things out of the water. Now, if you're not worried about things that are being splashed back in there, you could probably forego something like this, but this is about a $2 pair of safety glasses. And these glasses could be picked up at your local hardware store. And what it's going to do is it's going to keep maybe objects that fall or get splashed back in from coming up into here. We don't even know what things you might encounter. So a $2 pair of glasses can save a trip to the emergency room to have a piece of metal or glass removed from your eye. Once it dries and you're handling objects, a nice pair of gloves like these that have kind of a rubberized piece on there. We don't want you to use them in the water because they are not waterproof, but something like this where you can pick things up and have that not penetrate those gloves. And be assured that your hands are going to end up as in good a shape as when you started this recovery effort. And also contamination, we're worried about contamination. And then we never, ever want to forget about our lungs. Especially if you're dealing with mold, this is an N95 respirator. These can be purchased at your local hardware store, but what we want you to make sure is that it is rated with a NIOSH rating, an N95 at least, or an N100. A 2-strap mask is going to protect you and make sure that that's a good fit. So it's going to have 2 straps, and it's going to have, this one happens to have a valve that helps you breathe against resistance. There's lots of different good ones out there, but this is really a great one to have. And this will keep not only the splashback from some of that water We don't want any of that in our mouths, but also when you're dealing with mold, it'll keep the mold spores out of your lungs. And we want to make sure that people remember that. And then if I could make one point about keeping people who are immunocompromised, anyone that has maybe on chemotherapy, children, and your pets away from the recovery effort. Give them another job, but do not let them be in that water and that debris.
Okay, so I'm thinking about a lot of things right now, because there are folks who are likely needing to know this information who may not be somewhere where they can listen to you sharing that.
Right.
If we have viewers who are wanting to help and communicate to their neighbors, what would be the number one thing that people should remember that they can pass on to others?
And I'll give my suggestions, but I'd like Jessica to say from her expertise. But I think if we can think in terms of, first of all, being very gentle with our people. And I think we all want to reach out and help. And if someone says no thank you, it may just be that they just don't have the bandwidth right now to even accept your help. So it has nothing personal about that, but I do want to remind people. But also, there's some great websites out there. And if you're going to donate monetarily, always remember that you need to choose an organization that is reputable. And there's lots of great ones out there. And also then that people can donate their time. And lots of these, I know, and I can speak, there's lots of communities, small rural communities, that could use people that can use a shovel. And this would be going to maybe some of the businesses that were wiped out in these towns. And all you have to do is look at those maps, choose a point on the map, and get hold of the people at the city hall and say, how can I help? And if you have even a day, this coming Saturday would be a great day to do it. Reach out and let them tell you where they need you. Don't assume.
Yeah, and I think we generally want to reach out. That's what we were hearing about in your community. But the toughest part about it is, where do I start? Who do I call? And you've given us some really good advice in terms of those first contacts, and then they can get you where you need to be. I want to go back, Ellen, to something you said, and Jessica, if you want to comment on this too. Sure. We do have that that feeling of wanting to help, and there are going to be people out there, for whatever reason, are going to say no thank you. How much do you dig to want to help them before you say, I gotta back up? Because we worry about people.
Of course we do, and we think that we know best, don't we?
Yeah.
But I will tell you, people in stressful situations, if they say no once, I think we need to be respectful and back off. And that's not to say you can't ask in 2 days again. But at that point, they don't need any more stress or feel like they're guilty because they did not accept your help. Would you agree with that?
I would definitely agree. I've seen that go on a lot. I mean, people are coming into people's homes, which they value. It's their own safe space. And when you have people that go in there and start taking apart your furniture and your belongings, you feel kind of like a sense of you is gone. They're seeing it before you are. And so I would say, if you know someone in a flooded area, give them a call, send them a message. On social media, something, just saying, hey, I'm here. If you need something, I'm thinking about you, and when the time's right, let's get together and I'll help you put back the pieces, and in a few years, hopefully we'll all be in a better place. So. Yeah,
Ellen, she said in a few years, and I think that's important for all of us to remember, that when tragedy strikes, our instinct is to want to run and help, and then time passes. And that healing is still going on for people, and of course we all heal in different ways. And so if we circle back, walk us down a little ways, let's go into the future, circle back at what point, Ellen?
Well, I would say you can circle back. You don't have to wait too long to do that, but here's some great ideas. We're going to have some of these small communities that will be struggling to survive. So how about taking a trip out to eat at their restaurant once it reopens? We talked about farmers markets before the show. How about going to the farmers market and showing your support, even if you don't really like vegetables. Find a neighbor that does, and buy them a big bag from the farmer, and tell them that you respect what they've been through, because some of these farmers at these markets will be the ones who have been through this and will be battling. And this doesn't, like you said, it'll be years, and that's a hard thing for people to think about the long term. But we do need, that's part of the advice that came from the behavioral health group here in Nebraska. Think about long term. You know, think how can you see something bright? We need to see human nature. We need to see something bright in the future.
That's a great point. Even if it's just extending your hand to shake someone else's, to say congratulations for making it through what is a very awful time. We have some websites that we want to put up for our viewers in case they would like to know more information about what we've been discussing today. Of course, life after the flooding. UNMC, great website, .edu, and then cdc.gov. And then finally, we have agrisafe.org, which again, a wealth of information. Ladies, I want to thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your time and your expertise, especially your stories, Jessica. On behalf of everybody who was impacted by this, thank you for being here today. Thank our students for working so hard behind the scenes, of course our viewers for watching. As we close, a look at the Weber Art Gallery here on campus as seen through the lens of Anam Al-Ruwaidi, a junior at UNO. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at netnebraska.org/considerthis. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call UNO Television at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu.
Support for Consider This is provided by the University of Nebraska at Omaha College of Communication, Fine Arts, and Media.